Welcome to Love and Money Secrets TV. I'm your host, Dame Lillian Walker, and I wanted to address an issue that one of the people reached out to me in one of my private Facebook groups, and she said, what do I do? I've got 3 kids right now, all with fevers, everyone is sick. She goes, she's sick, her husband is sick, and her kids are just, she's got Gwen, Stabarskalot, and Pukey Brewster, and despair. So she's got 3 kids that are up chucking and it's just miserable. And she's undersleeping and overworked and with no end in sight and having to give medicines at all these different hours and different doses for 3, she's got 300, I think it's 3 under 10. And so it's chaotic. And, I'm a mom of 3 kids, so I know exactly what that's like. I know exactly what that feels like. And, I'll never forget one time when I was driving my 3 kids to school, and especially when you have younger ones, I put the toddler, the baby in the car, and then I've got my daughter who is like, at the time she was in 1st grade, and then my older son who was like 10. And we're driving, and my kids, knock on wood, they were pretty healthy. However, this particular morning, I had no clue that there was anything that was going to go wrong or anything that was going to go south on me or awry. And so I'm driving on my way to take them to school. And my daughter, who was sitting directly behind me, all of a sudden, Gwen Stabarskalot, boom, it's a volcano that just erupted and is like, boom, just all over her shirt. And I was lucky that it didn't start a domino effect where it just went down the line where the other 2, because oftentimes people are so repulsed and grossed out by regurgitation, by vomit, that they will vomit. In fact, when I worked as an emergency med tech while I was in college and right after college, I remember that there were firemen that they could see anything, except if someone were to puke, they would say, scoot over, and they would puke too. They could see blood, they could see anything. But when it came to vomit, they didn't have the stomach for that. They had the stomach for everything else but that. So here you have this 6'4", 240-pound, all muscle, Samson, Herculean type guy. But when it comes to vomit, they're just like scoot over, and they're, basically singing the same tune. So what is a mom to do when something like that happens? Okay, I'm going to tell you what it was that I did. I'm going to tell you a few little secrets that not enough moms know about, which more than ever, and unfortunately, I do have a great deal of experience of, I did lose my 1st child, my 2nd child, we almost lost him after 11 and a half weeks of being in the hospital. He was in Children's Hospital of Orange County, CHOC, and he had just 4 months before, my husband's coworker in December had passed away of Guillain-Barré, and then my oldest son came down with Guillain-Barré. He was only 11 years old, which is absolutely unheard of. We're going to hear a lot more of that going on with the entire population, not just children. It's very rare for kids. However, it's more common with adults that are 50, 60, 70 years old, and it's usually a reaction to a flu shot. In this case, we don't know. We never found out what the cause was of his Guillain-Barré, but nonetheless, he suffered from Guillain-Barré, and it took 5 weeks for him to be diagnosed. He had every neurological test, spinal taps, MRIs, CAT scans, you name it. So there's a video that I did on how I healed my son with meditation on my YouTube channel, which is at least a couple years old. I did it in 2019. But this is something that you need to know, moms, because no one, I think I'm the only person that I'm aware of that talks about this. No one told me the 11 weeks that I was in the hospital with my son. No one told me during the year that it took for him to heal and to get back to 100%. No one. I didn't hear a doctor, rabbi, priest, minister, spiritual leader, guru, mystic, monk, other mothers. No one has ever said this to me. It's something that I figured out intuitively when I was dealing with my son. And the key component is this: your kids, the strongest connection that a child will have with any other human being, first of all, is the mother. I'm going to say that again, because this cannot be emphasized enough. And there's more to it, which I'm about to explain and unfold here. But the strongest connection that any human being can experience is with their mother first. And it doesn't matter, in my experience, what I have now witnessed since getting up until this very point, is that it doesn't matter if you gave birth to that child, if that child was conceived with your ovum and your significant other's sperm, and you had a surrogate, or if you adopted the child, because a child who was adopted was born from your soul and from your heart. Maybe they didn't come out of your womb, but make no mistakes, they were born in your heart. There's supernatural things that took place in order for that to take place. So that being said, from a biophysiological point of view, and from I'm going to always take the stand of neuroscience, because that's the background from which I come from, because I'm a clinical neurosomatic practitioner. So when you look at how the body works, at the human brain and how the heart works, the mother's heart and brain is one that will affect the behavior, the well-being, and the stance of the child. So what does that mean? So your child is going to entrain to you, to your mood, to your sense of well-being, to your state of health, or your state of dysregulation. So the more schizophrenic, the more out of control, the more nervous, the more intolerant, the more annoyed, the more frustrated that you are, the more fatigued, the more any of those things that we're all familiar with as moms, the more your kids are going to react and act up against that. I have a great deal of people who have neurological issues and disorders, everything from gunshots to the head, to brain tumors, to either them or their kids are having epilepsy, Parkinson's. I mean, the list, there's neurological disorders that you've probably never heard of. It's absolutely incredible. And the one thing in working with mothers, the first thing I always tell them is this principle that I've just shared with you. The fact that your autonomic nervous system, your heart and your brain, you influence your child because your child's autonomic nervous system is in training to yours. So what does that mean? Okay, let's rewind the tape back into my past to when my son was 11 years old and he was in the hospital. Now, granted, I had the good fortune, I had the advantage that I did have training as a first responder. I was an emergency med tech. I worked a lot of high trauma events because we saw either nothing would happen or horrific things would happen, because there were car races, motorcycle races, ATV races. There were a lot. It was a special events ambulance company. So I spent a lot of time in the emergency room, because those guys, when they get hurt, it's usually pretty bad. They either walk away with something minor or it's awful. Okay. So it was the extremes. We never kind of had just something mild. So as far as you as a mom, you need to be aware that the degree to which you can hit the pause button, and this has so many applications that will serve you in ways that will pay off, like hitting the lotto in like multiple fold. But your ability to hit the pause button the moment you realize either that you're raising your voice, that you are getting nervous, if you're starting to get a panic attack, if you're getting frustrated, if you're annoyed, if you're unnerved, if you're pissed to hell and back. This is not a politically correct show, by the way. So mind you, if there's anything that offends you, that's not my intention. My intention is to help you transform with useful information, collapse the timeframes in the quickest time possible so that you can effectuate the outcome that you desire. Okay. So sorry, I'm not going to be politically correct. So yes, you've got a puke fest going on. You have kids that are going crazy, whatever the case might be. And now you find yourself all up in arms, freaked out, pissed off, TO'd, whatever the case might be. Hit the pause button. You hit the pause button and go timeout. You're putting yourself in timeout. You put your ego in timeout, because you might be going, what am I doing wrong? Oh my gosh, this is just a shitstorm. This is just blah, 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 blah. I can't believe, no, it's like these ungrateful little blah, blah, blah. Whatever your self-talk happens to be, You know what it is. We're all familiar. No one's perfect. None of us are saints in the privacy of our own thoughts, inside of our head. So hit the pause button. First thing you do is you hit the pause button and you realize, you know what? I got to get a grip. I need to get back in control. I need to slow down my breath. I mean, it's so basic. You slow down your breath and you just go start taking 10 slow, deep breaths. And when you see, after you're seeing, you're hearing, you're feeling what's going on inside your body, the time that it takes you to do those 10 deep breaths, recognizing that as you slow yourself down and as you start to get control, your kids are in training to you. So they're going to start to calm down. They will start to calm down. Okay. And when you stop reacting with the same type of crazy energy back to them, then they're going to start to simmer down too, because that energy begets that energy. And so your calm energy begets that calm energy. So as you start to get a grip, and it takes the more you do it and the more often you do this, the quicker you will start to see results where your kids are going to start to behave better. If your kids are ill, again, you can't afford, first of all, as you do the 10 deep breaths, the next thought is you can't afford the luxury of a negative thought. Oh my gosh, their fever is 101. Will it get to 103 or 104 or God forbid 105? Are they going to have a seizure? Are they going to have, something bad that's going to happen to them because your fever, maybe they're hovering around 103.4, 0.5, 0.6 already. You're like, oh, is it going to go to 104? No, you can't afford, literally, you cannot afford the luxury of a negative thought. You can't afford it for yourself, and you most definitely can't afford it for that kid, because you don't want that kid to move that temperature up to a higher degree. On the contrary, you want to bring it down. So once you do that, hit the pause button, take your 10 deep breaths, and then you tell yourself that you can't afford the luxury of a negative thought. You put your ego in timeout, point to the left, because your left brain versus your right brain. You're going to point to the left, ego, timeout, brain, do as I say, and we are going to take care of business. Then you grab Johnny, you grab Gwen, you grab, Peter, whatever your child's name is, and then you start to work with a kid and you start to pay attention, not just what your kid is telling you, because sometimes they don't have the language, especially if they're very young. But even if they're older kids, heck, I know adults that don't have the proper words to express and to explain what it is that they're feeling. So don't expect a child to be able to articulate to you with perfection what it is that they're experiencing or what they're going through. But as a mom, you can feel what is theirs as opposed to what is yours, especially as you begin to pay closer attention to this. So you start to realize it's like, well, I'm healthy, I'm fine, but they're the one with the fever. It's like, wait a minute, all of a sudden you might have a side pain, or you might have a funny vibration in a leg, or you may have all of a sudden the onset of an ache on the back left-hand side of your head. You can ask your kid, it's like, listen, Gwen, are you feeling like a sensation in the back of your head, or do you feel like your head, like maybe it doesn't hurt, but it feels funny where you could feel your inside your head, you can feel like something jiggling in there and it feels odd? Just ask questions based on the sensations that you're having in your body, because you are entrained to them and they are entrained to you. Now, because you are healthy and they are unhealthy at the moment, they are predisposed to get back in alignment with you. Keep them well hydrated. If they have a fever, start not a cold bath, because you don't want to shock their little bodies, but you're going to start a lukewarm bath that you're going to add cold water to, that will slowly make it cooler and cooler and cooler, so that their temperature, because the skin is the largest organ in the body. Given that the skin is the largest organ in the body, faster than any over-the-counter medication that you can give is to put them in a lukewarm bathtub. And you don't even have to say much. especially if the kid is crying and they're kind of like really getting out of control. By the way, putting a kid in a lukewarm bathtub with water that's getting it cooler and cooler and cooler also serves to calm down a child who's in the midst of a tantrum. If you have a kid who's in the midst of a tantrum, who's having an absolute conniption fit, you don't say a word. After you've gotten your composure, if you don't have your composure, then you do the 10 deep breaths, let them have a cow, get yourself, get a grip, 10 deep breaths, tell your ego time out, brain, do as I say. But if you already have your wits about you, then you don't talk to a kid who's having a cow. They're not listening to you anyhow. So what difference does it make what you say? It's a waste of time and energy, and it's just going to frustrate the kid anymore because they can't hear you because they're too busy screaming. So you just very calmly grab the kid, either walk them or take them. You carry them into the bathroom. You put them, you sit them down. You turn on the bathtub. Don't say a word. Don't make any eye contact either. You know what you're doing. You turn on the bathtub. You put lukewarm water. You make sure, test the temperature with your elbow or with your hand. And then you begin to undress the kid. You don't need to say anything to them. You're going to notice a lot of times they're going to, doesn't matter. You start to undress them. And as you undress them, then you very calmly put them in the bathtub. And then you just swish the water while they're in the bathtub, distracting them. And they don't really know what you're doing. But before you know it, inside of about a minute, no more than 2 minutes, you'll notice that they'll be going, they'll be doing the 2 physiological sighs followed by the long exhale, because that's something that's innately wired in us humans to sedate our hippocampus. Notice that in the PSMO, we did that on purpose, but it's something that's wired in us as mammals, human beings, and all animals do this, okay? So now you have expedited the process. Instead of the tantrum going on for whoever knows how long, you have fast-tracked it. You put the kid in the bathtub, whether they have a fever or they're having a conniption fit, doesn't matter. And now you calm down that kid. And now they're starting to calm down. You're just swishing the water. As you're swishing into the water, you're also paying attention the temperature of the water. At some point, the kid's gonna, stop crying, and then they're gonna say, it's starting to get cold in here. Their temperature will have dropped. Once they're, you're going to get them out of the tub. My guess is like 20 minutes, perhaps. Then it doesn't matter. You don't need to time it. You just use your own instinct as a mother. You'll know when to take them out. Then once you take them out, then you start to dry them out, with a towel, and then grab the thermometer, take their thermometer, and you'll see that their temperature will have dropped. If it was 103, they're now back down to 99 or 98. At that point, then it's a judgment call on your port. 98.7 is the textbook temperature for, normal temperature. Some kids run a little warmer, some kids run a little cooler. So you have to test your kids when they're healthy so that you know what they normally run, knowing that when kids first wake up, everybody's body temperature is lowest when you first wake up because all your vitals drop. When you're sleeping, your heart rate, your blood, your pulse ox, your blood pressure, everything, respirations per minute, everything drops when you sleep. And then when you're awake, because you're moving around, everything goes up. So you need to find out what the baseline for your kid is so that you're not unnecessarily thinking that they have more of a temperature. Because if your kid normally runs 99.3, 99.5, 99.2, and now they have 101 or 100.2 degree temperature, you're going to say, oh, they have a fever. Not really. 100 degrees, if you normally run 99.2, 99.3, that's not really a fever. You're just 1 degree elevated temperature. Heck, you could get that from running. So those are little things that you need to pay attention to. So that is the quickest way you can get not only yourself to calm down, but also your kid to calm down. Again, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns about this method, I got to tell you the bathtub method, it's an very old Italian trick that I learned from my paternal grandmother. And my grandmother had 2 sets of twins, not 1 set of twins, 2 sets of twins. She had 7 kids, 2 sets of twins back to back. Imagine that, like 100 years ago. I don't know how she did it. That's before microwaves. That's before all the modern electronics that we have, before television sets, before all sorts of things. And I remember talking to her, and she told me the oldest set of twins is Junior and Natalie, and her nickname was Nati. And Nati, when she was 6 years old, she had an absolute cow, threw herself on the floor, and she was on, the tile floor, and she just started like having an absolute conniption fit. And my grandmother told me, because my Uncle Junior never had a fit, but my Aunt Nati was really kind of more hot tempered. And my grandmother, nothing made her lose her cool. She was like cool as a cucumber. She said that she just looked at her, went to the back of the house, grabbed a bucket of cold water. She didn't do the lukewarm bath. She had less mercy on her daughter than I did with my kids for whatever reason. There were different times, I guess. But she, and of course it's colder here in California than it was, although it gets pretty cold. It gets pretty cold in Italy too. So anyhow, nonetheless, she grabbed a bucket of cold water, and then she just doused her. And she said that as soon as the cold water hit her, then my aunt, she went from going, wah, to all of a sudden she was like, because the cold water shocked her. So as soon as she literally her temperature went from blazing hot to, it was an abrupt stop where she was like cold. And then she stopped screaming. And then she said, it literally cooled her down like this. And she said she never had another temper tantrum after that again. And I remember that was years before I had my first child. And I thought, that's really good to know. I go, okay. I don't know if she had to do it with any of the other, again, she had 7 kids. I don't know if she had to do it with the others. I know she didn't have to do it with Junior. I suspect she didn't have to do it with my dad, because my dad's always been really easygoing. I suspect maybe my other aunt, Noemi, she may have had to do that because she was kind of feisty, and, she's a real go-getter and just kind of very feisty. But it worked. And so I remember the first time I had to use that with my own child, I had to do it with my oldest son, who's actually pretty easygoing, but he was feeling threatened by his little sister. And, it was like he was used to being king for 5 years, almost 6 going on 7 years. He was like the only child. And now, his little sister came around, and I think he was wanting to get some attention. And so I ended up doing that with him, and he never had another tantrum. Again, he was almost 7 years old. Then my daughter, I had to do it with my daughter also. My daughter, she was hot tempered though. She was really fit to be tied. And I remember the first time I did that with her, even though the water was not that cold, she was none too happy. And it definitely started to cool her down, but she was none too happy that she was getting an assist. And I'll never forget, she was starting to go into a temper tantrum a second time. And I said, I immediately went a beeline to the bathroom, turned on the water in the tub. She knew what was coming. And she's like, oh, I don't need to take a bath to cool me down. I can calm myself down. And you could tell she was fighting with every fiber of her being. She was using her own willpower to calm herself down because she didn't want to get into that bathtub. She wanted to do this her own way. And so she went from having the beginning of a tantrum to she was calming herself down, and she was like bearing down, going, and doing these. No one told her to do long, deep breaths, but she instinctively knew to do that. And that was it. After that, she never even skirted around. She may have gotten mad, but never anything like that. So it worked. My third child, he's so easygoing that I don't think he's just never, he's gotten mad, but he never got that mad. So let me know if you try this and how it works for you. I've given this, I've talked to, I used to be mother of preschoolers group and moms group, and how it is when your kids are in school and so forth. So there's hundreds of friends of mine that have used this and tried this, and clients too, that I have also mentioned this as well as a tool for you to, you don't know what you don't know until you know it. And thank goodness, that I had my beautiful, late grandmother who's no longer with us, who shared that wisdom with me that I was able to implement. Okay. So I hope this is helpful to you. Thank you, my friends and gems. And as always, ciao for now.